What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you, as always, with my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It is time, the long-awaited podcast that absolutely no one, aside from Grant, asked for. 2025 NBA All-Star picks. The second round of voting is going to release on Thursday, which is when you should be listening or watching this. So look at us being topical advertently, as Grant just put it before we hopped on. Mr. Hughes, before we get into our approach to this, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing well. Despite, as you mentioned, I suffered through a lot of doubt and questions putting these all-star lists together because I'm sure I forgot somebody or miscategorized or was biased in one way or another. So, I guess I'm feeling good, but I have some concerns. Are you in the same boat at the moment?
I'm filled with this immeasurable, ineffable rage directed at you because you were the one that suggested this topic, and
you're hiding it well.
I am right. I'm actually shaking. I'm like, look at how steady my hand is right now. I don't know why I agonize over these picks for so long, because I exist to try and make us like the least controversial NBA podcast in the world, and I just don't want people to get mad. But then it's so hard to narrow this down, especially when you factor in the positional criteria. And that's the two things that I kind of stuck towards. And we'll start with the positional stuff. I really was tempted to just be like, well, this guy's kind of big and he defends wings on defense, I'm going to categorize him as a front court player. I didn't do that. Like, if they're not eligible and I don't know, like Cade Cunningham as an example, I treat him as a guard. If it comes out that when media actually does their votes, they're allowed to put him in the forward category, I will be annoyed, because that would have made my East team a lot easier to figure out. But I really did try to adhere to, okay, like, these are what these players are classified as. Like, this is what the data says. This is what they play. And I'm choosing selected off that, even though, as you know, I am not a fan of positions overall. Even the generalized ones of this, where it's backcourt / front court, makes it a lot easier than guard, forward, center, for sure. I want to make that clear.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely agonize less over the positions. We'll see how stupid that might have been. But it's just, I kind of went with like, if I can justify this guy as a guard in some way, like, I'm good with it. Like, I know that's not going to sync up with, maybe it will. I don't know. I don't think I made any crazy leaps, but if it's going to sync
starting
up,
in the backcourt for the West, Victor Wembanyama.
Right. Look at all the threes he shoots. Tell me that's not a guard. So aside from positions, All-Star's weird. It's not like all NBA or MVP, which I think we sort of have a better idea of like what our qualifications are, because the All-Star thing by definition like has a fan vote. So there's a bit of a popularity contest. I didn't approach it that way. I kind of looked at it as like who deserves it, quote unquote. And that's going to include, I guess, some considerations on like volume of play in addition to the quality of it. I had a pretty low bar for like how much you needed to have played. Like Paolo Banchero, not going to make it. Not enough. Zion, not enough. Like, but there's some guys with 20 something games, and we're 30 plus in, where I just let it slide. And I wonder if you went that way, or if, like, without spoiling it, I guess, but what are your criteria, and does volume matter to some extent?
I think volume definitely matters when you're looking at differential. Everything matters when you're trying to create some type of separation. I looked at it as, so one of my criteria was I have to believe that you could be healthy or available when the All-Star game is played. And so that's why Franz Wagner is not going to be on my list, because look at how long Paolo Banchero was out with his oblique injury. He's returning this week. But Franz Wagner is not going to be ready by February. And so he would have made my list if I thought he was going to play. So like, I gave Luka Doncic more consideration for the West because he's supposed to be back by the time All-Star game rolls around. So I didn't pay attention to, okay, Luka, he's not going to be eligible to win MVP. Like in 2 or 3 days, that's when his eligibility is going to go away, maybe 4 days, whatever. But because I think he's going to be available for the All-Star game, I gave him consideration. However, I did approach, and I'm with you on the team success. That mattered to me, but like, if I was going to, I focus more on individual brilliance, on who I just think like these players have been great. And it's not, I didn't try to go with, who are the fans going to vote for? These are just, I'm picking All-Star. This would be my teams. But what I did with the wild card this year that I'm not sure I did in years past, if I was like, this team is really good, but I didn't have an All-Star for them yet, that would be the spot where I'd put them. Or if I was worried about availability, where it's, okay, this guy's has missed a bunch of time, is going to continue to miss a bunch of time. Like, that was kind of for the wild card spot unless I think they've been so just incredible or the field that just allowed it. But that's how I try to use the wild card spot this time. A lot of times it's, well, positionally, like this just makes it easier. Like there's so many guards in the East that deserve consideration. Your wild card spots, I think, are going to gravitate towards them. It wasn't like, oh, I have one front court wild card and one backcourt wild card. But I think the big consideration I gave in those wild card spots was that's where I might have waited. All right, maybe I think there's been a player who's been better, but this player's driving winning more, and we don't have an all-star yet from their team, or maybe we do, and I want to include multiples. And then that was also that's kind of the fuck availability spot for me too.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like we'll have some differences, which is always interesting. So excited to see where we land on this.
We begin with our East starters, which are up on the screen for anyone who's watching on YouTube. I'll leave the East because East Coast bias. In the backcourt, I have Donovan Mitchell and Jalen Brunson. This ended up being like pretty tough for me because I really did give consideration to should Darius Garland be there as well. Even Cade Cunningham as a starter in the backcourt. In my front court, I have Jason Tatum, Giannis, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Those were pretty easy for me. I really did do a deep dive into Evan Mobley versus Karl-Anthony Towns for that kind of starting final front court spot. I think I just value the self-creation and the efficiency and just the level of defensive attention that Karl-Anthony Towns is going to face as a featured option. Of course, the scoring volume is there too. The Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Darius Garland of it all was tough for me, but Jalen Brunson drives everything for New York still. Even I've seen a lot of metrics will like Towns better. I've seen a lot of people include Cat over Brunson in their MVP leaderboard. Maybe start. I don't know if you want to give us your starters, then we could talk about maybe backcourt, front court, like versus. But who do you have?
Yeah, so I did go with Garland. We're the same, except I went Garland over Mitchell, and that was really hard. The Brunson was a lock to me, and maybe this is before we get into the Garland Mitchell of it, like Brunson's job is just like there's not a stat for this. You could find plenty of stats that would serve as proxies for this argument, but his job is just so much harder than Cat's. Like his time on the ball is insane. And like just what he's required to do as a like defense in terms of like breaking down a defense, like second to Shea in drives per game this year. He has a higher assist rate on drives than Shea, turns it over less often. So Shea's the gold standard in drives, but like Brunson finishes his drives very differently, but the getting into the paint is just like, that's the threshold thing for a good offense, which the Knicks definitely have. And he's just the guy that makes that happen. Cat, like, we could talk. I have some insane Cat stats we could talk about in a second, but like the Garland Mitchell decision to me came down to Garland has been more efficient, 63 true shooting, which is just like for a guard is absurd. 26 usage. He and Jokic and SGA are the only guys with 63 true shooting and over 200 assists on the year. So it's like he ticks the boxes of just an elite offensive engine. Mitchell's awesome. Like that, I think I put Garland as a starter while acknowledging, I think like, oh, if I have to start a playoff roster tomorrow, I probably want Mitchell, over Garland. I think he's better. But like Mitchell just hasn't quite had the statistical impact Garland has. And I just wanted to, hand it to him for that.
It's actually glad that we both like picked the other one because I looked at it as Garland does feel like he drives more of the offense as a playmaker, but I think they both can do that. Like you can captain the offense with either one of them as the primary scorer or playmaker. The biggest differentiator for me was, so Garland's shoulders, what I think, Donovan Mitchell's probably been more effective on defense this year. Darius Garland's role is harder when you're kind of looking at the players he goes up against, but Donovan Mitchell is still the guy on Cleveland who draws the toughest defensive assignments when he's on offense. Like that's the guy that defenses are going to zero in on. And so a lot of the things that are happening, not that it's by necessity. I do think Darius Garland is just inherently the better live dribble playmaker, but like his job, I think Donovan Mitchell, just the existence of him simplifies life for everyone else around them on offense, even when he's not on the ball. Again, it was so close. I thought, by the way, I know you said Brunson was a lock. I might be reading too much into his recent shooting slump because he's still at like 39% from three on 6 attempts per game with 25 points and 7.5 assists. But I thought about just going Garland to Mitchell. I mean, they're both headlining what's probably going to be a 70-win team, but that's like which is kind of bonkers, by the way. So I gave that like real consideration too. It wasn't like, oh, I could only include one Cav. I'm with you on what you say about Brunson when you're looking at just when you factor in the playmaking. I know Cat's had a good playmaking season, but the level of self-creation Jalen Brunson needs to shoulder compared to Karl-Anthony Towns. So yeah, it was basically, so we're framing it as it's Jalen Brunson plus a Cav in the backcourt, I think is the right answer.
On Cat though, so this is a good time as any to bring it up. Like, so among 25-point scorers this season, he averages 2.1 minutes of touch time per game, which is by far the lowest. So he's just like, I don't mean to in any way like diminish what he's done. He's been one of the, I don't know, half dozen best offensive players in basketball this year. But Brunson in that same group of 25-point scorers has the most touch time per game at 8. So he has 8.7 minutes on the ball in a game, which is 4x Cat and like significantly ahead of anybody else. And I think that to me, also Cat averages fewer than one dribble per touch, which is unique in that 25-point scorer group. Nobody else does that. So I think that I'm just like solidifying Brunson's case, I think, where it's just like his responsibilities are like way just beyond almost anybody else's, and that offense is super good. But I do like the synergy of either Garland or Mitchell, and it's like fine either way. Like I can't argue that Mitchell doesn't belong there either.
Do you think that, is there anyone, I mean, that would kind of lead us into reserves, but like Tatum and Giannis are just, the East front court is not particularly deep with quality options, I would say. So Giannis, just the numbers are insane for him again this year. The mid-range efficiency has held, and his defense has gotten better. It was like iffy to start the year, and it's just gotten better. Probably not what it was 2 or 3 years ago, but it's gotten better. He was easy for me. And Tatum, okay, best player on the Celtics, and they've kind of like slumped off his playmaking a little bit, but this dude is just, I don't like, for some reason, do we still just not appreciate his ability to create and make shots from the perimeter, or specifically as a 3-point shooter? He's in the 3rd percentile, Grant, of 3-point shot quality, and yet he's still just downing around 37% of his triples per game. The 3rd percentile of 3-point shot quality.
And he's shooting 80% at the rim, which is like the new dimension of it. Like as he's developed and gotten stronger, he's just like a nightmare downhill. That's like unheard of for a non-dunk only, like non-Daniel Gafford player to be, to be that efficient at close range. Giannis, the stat I found that like Giannis and Tatum are just like, they're starting. We don't really need to, but he, when on the floor, ups the Bucks transition frequency by almost 5%, which is like a 99th percentile figure, which like, man, you need that. Like I don't know where they are offensively if they're not getting the transition boost that he provides. So kind of like looking for a reason, like not that we need reasons, but just like there's so many like beyond points, rebounds, assists, good defense to like credit those two guys for.
You'd already talked about Towns, but did you consider, was your front court the easy 3, or did you consider anybody aside from Towns?
I think Mobley was probably so I do have Franz as a reserve, and had he stayed healthier, that would have made the front court picks and sustained what he was doing. That would have made the front court picks quite a bit harder. Even then, like Cat's been so good. I'm not bumping Giannis. I'm not bumping Tatum. So maybe it was going to be this no matter what, but Franz, like 25 games, but he has the same, if you're looking at EPM, he has the same estimated wins still, which is the cumulative stat, as Mitchell. He has more than Steph, more than Cade, more than Luka, more than Fox, more than Ant. Like Franz's year, even though he hasn't played for, I don't know, 3 weeks now, 2 weeks, whatever it is. Like if you just stopped it now, you'd say, yeah, he's been one of like the 15 best players in the league still, just like cumulatively, because he was so good when he was there.
I think if he was healthy and still doing what he was doing, I probably would have had him in over Towns. He was top 5 on my MVP leaderboard.
Right.
Before
we had him all NBA easy.
I struggle with him because it's okay if the season, and like this is different than we're not doing quarter, half season all-star picks. Like this is just our all-star picks for what's going to happen. He's not going to be healthy when they get, like, and he'll have missed X amount of time by then. So I have him as an honorable mention, but I couldn't bring myself to pick him knowing that he's not going to be eligible to play in the all-star game. And then I would just name an injury replacement.
My thought was like, let's give him the spot, and then that guarantees somebody else also gets in as an injury replacement. So I just want everyone to be an all-star, Dan. I
Well,
want
doesn't it
everyone to
work
feel
out to
good.
be the same thing then? Is that, but you were able to say, oh, I have Franz here, and then I'm going to replace him with X.
Pretty
I'm just
much.
saying he's an
Pretty
honorable
much.
mention.
Okay, so I said I have a Mitchell as a reserve guard. Who's your other reserve guard? Have you said that yet?
So I have my reserves in the East for the, let's tackle the backcourt. I have Cade and Darius Garland. I mean, we went through the Darius Garland of it all. I don't think that people, I'm sure Detroit, I want to make clear, I think Detroit Pistons fans absolutely understand how good Cade Cunningham has been this year. He has been, I think I see too much of people saying, well, he's below 55 or 56 true shooting.
Yep.
Yeah, no shit. Like, he has one of the lowest shot qualities in the league. And I guess you could blame that on him. Could he create better separation? But he's on pace to join Luka, Trey, and Jokic as the only players ever to average 24 points, 9 assists, and shoot at least 37% from three. And then when you look at the 250-ish players who have logged at least 500 minutes this year, only 4 players have a lower shot quality. So for him just shooting 37% from three on that, I think is a really big deal. I also don't know if we really, he's also, by the way, he's 7th in unassisted rim field goal attempts per 75 possession. Giannis is first because of course.
Right.
And like, you just look at what he does, even as a, like, just a creator. He's in the top 5 of true usage. This is all players playing at least 500 minutes. He's the box creation, which is an estimate of the open shots he carves out for teammates by drawing in defensive attention. He's in the top 5 of that as well, too. This is someone who keeps popping up when you look at all these individual offensive metrics, and it comes with, he's a better rebounder. I think he's been better on defense this year. I wanted to, because there are so many guard options in the East, I wanted to figure out a way to put him in the front court. But I looked at it. There's probably enough defensive data to stretch it just because he does guard some 3s and 4s. But it's the Luka, it's the LeBron. It's like this. He is their floor general. He is their point guard. And so this was tough when you're looking at the other names that are on there: LaMelo, Trey, Tyrese Maxey, Dame. I think Garland was in for me. So it was, okay, who's going to fill that second reserve spot before we get to wild cards? I landed on Cade. He's been amazing this year. And hey, by the way, I'm going to say this flat out. I have kind of a rule that if you're going to be on my MVP leaderboard, your team needs to have won the minutes that you've been on the court. Cade's getting there. Like, the Pistons are close to have wanting the full minutes with him on the floor this season. I had him as an honorable mention in my last MVP leaderboard. Like, you could make the case just based on his importance to this team that he is a back of the ballot MVP. That is how good Cade Cunningham has been this year.
Yeah, so I did have to stretch it and call him a forward, and he does make my team as a reserve forward because there's too many guards in the East. Like, all my snubs in the East are guards. I gravitated towards the 24-9 thing with Cade as well. He and Jokic are the only guys doing that this year. I didn't even thin slice it for the 3-point percentage. I should have done that. And like, the true shooting is not good. But the Pistons just cannot score when he isn't in the game. And I'm going to use this against another player at some point here. So I will admit to the sort of like unfairness, but the Pistons are at 112.7 offensive rating with Cade on the floor. It's like 105 without him. 112.7 is not awesome. It's like good enough, I think. And he is the reason that it is good. Like, if you take him away, there's just, who else is like making anything happen for that team? So I think he's a deserving forward. My other guard, I feel like this will surprise you, is Derek White. He just makes the, like, he gets the advanced metrics case. He gets the team success case. He gets the individual production. So he's 10th in estimated wins on dunks and threes, which is okay. Well, like, that's persuasive. His 3-point volume is like the big difference this year. He's up to over 13 attempts per 100 possessions, and he's hitting them at 39%. So like, and that's a massive jump for him. And I think like the defensive component of it, like, he's always, for me, on the short list of the best defensive guards in the league. He and Wemby are the only players in the league averaging at least a block and 3 made threes this year. So like, anytime you're in like only this guy and someone else with Wemby, I feel like you've done something pretty special, especially if you're like 6'4" or whatever Derek White is. So he made my other reserve guard spot, and I feel good about it, but I very much doubt he's going to make an all-star game because there are at least 2 other Celtics beyond Tatum that like people are just going to vote for before him. But I needed to get him on here.
There's wait, 2 others besides Tatum that they're going to vote for
Well,
before Derek
I
White?
mean,
So
Jaylen Brown is just the more popular player, and I thought about him, but the numbers just weren't there. And I feel like people, if you ask like fans that might vote for All-Star game, like who's better, Drew Holiday or Derek White? I imagine a lot of people would still say Drew Holiday. They'd probably be wrong, but like Holiday's the guy with the track record and the name recognition and all that stuff. Just talking about like who actually has a chance to make it, not like who we would consider the better player.
So I did go. It's just funny. So Derek White, I have qualified as a wing, so he's in my front court
I love it.
reserves for the East.
So we swapped Cade and Derek White, basically.
Right. So, I mean, basically the same deal there. And then I also have Pascal Siakam has been brilliant this year. Probably some slippage defensively, but he's been one of the Pacers' better defenders overall. And just everything about his offense, his ability to play when they are going at a faster clip, but also they like when they need someone to methodically break things down.
Yeah.
He's been excellent there. I have him. And then I also have Jaylen Brown. I know the 3-point efficiency isn't there. He is, when you individually on defense, Drew Holiday is the only player on the Celtics who covers tougher assignments than Jaylen Brown. He just gets to the basket like at an incredible clip this year. He's able to create for himself a little bit better. So I felt comfortable throwing him there. So I do have 3 Celtics now because Derek White is my other reserve there. I didn't even, if anyone's picking Drew Holiday before Derek White, I would question a lot of things about their views on it. I would say
LaMelo Ball leads among East guards in the first set of fan votes, so anything's possible.
First of all, don't get me on a LaMelo Ball rant just now. But who did you have as your front court? By the way, the front court reserves were, so I had Siakam, and then it was not that I didn't want to include Jaylen Brown, but I thought it was going to be harder for me. I was like, so it's going to be Jaylen Brown and who? And it was Jaylen Brown just ended up being, no, he's in there.
Yeah, I don't have Jaylen Brown. So I already mentioned I have Franz, talked about him. I have Cade as a front court player. So we're not really different there. We just put him in a different spot. And Mobley is the other front court reserve for me. Like we haven't really talked a bunch about Mobley, but elite rim protection, one of the most switchable guys among front court players in the league. Plus 6.1 net rating swing is the best on the Cavs among their top 4 guys. I don't know how much do we even need to say about him? He's like he's not going to win defensive player of the year because Wemby is a thing, but like he's probably 2 or 3, and he's been a very good offensive player on the best, like one of the best offenses in the league. So I don't know.
Well, you pointed out an error on my part because I had him in contention for a starter and then apparently left Evan Mobley out entirely. So Derek White is getting the boot.
I hate to see it, but I understand it.
So because Evan Mobley just needs to be in there for me. He's been spectacular on defense. He leads the league in points saved at the rim per 75 possessions. In addition to everything else, we've talked about what he does. By the way, he's like shooting the lights out from 3 on 4 attempts per game over the past month plus. Better at finishing through contact. They're not using him as this high volume initiator, but I think that his passes are of higher quality. Error on my part. Apologies to Derek White. But I think Mobley for me needs to be in there. So I ended up with 2 Celtics. The Jaylen Brown versus Derek White discussion though is interesting. What would you view? Is it just the offensive efficiency for Derek White? I just look at Jaylen Brown as a self-creator and then the rim pressure and then combined with what he does on defense. I still have him as a more impactful player than Derek White right now.
He was one of the really difficult cuts for me. And I when we get to wild cards, I could very easily be talked into either Siakam or Jaylen Brown bumping the 2 guys that I have there. But it was like the efficiency. It was just, I think Derek White, like he is a role player ultimately, right? Like Jaylen Brown is the guy that can do you're talking about self-creation, but I think White is absolutely perfect at like what he's asked to do. And Brown's probably asked to do a little bit more. I just thought the volume of threes, I'll just regurgitating what I said. And like the bottom line numbers just say White impacts winning more than Brown does. But it's like our defense is scheming more against, Jaylen Brown or Derek White. That's a very fair argument to make.
So can I give you the list of names that I considered for, if anyone's watching, they see our wild card picks up on the screen, but can I give you the list of names that I considered for a wild card spot?
Yes.
So Derek White, I guess, technically, but LaMelo Ball, Trae Young, Tyrese Maxey, Damian Lillard, Bam Adebayo. I have Franz Wagner as an honorable mention and Jalen Johnson. Who am I leaving? Did I leave anybody out there? I was wondering if Mikal Bridges or OG Anunoby deserved a mention there. I think that's a little bit too deep of a cut. Josh Hart, maybe still too deep of a. Let me just name Knicks: Tyler Kolek, Pacome Dadier.
I think the ones I have that you didn't mention, you mentioned Dame, right? I think you said Dame. Zach LaVine was one that I thought about. Tyler Hero, same vein, just like ridiculous scoring efficiency. You're just not getting anything else from either of those guys. You know, you're getting the like 4 or 5 assists, I guess, but wasn't real. LaVine has been, if you start like filtering for like scoring efficiency at volume, LaVine is again just like this guy fills it up like really, but I can't make him an all-star. Same with Hero.
I did consider Hero, and when you're like the efficiency and the scoring, but just, and this is good on him for doing this, but like I can't bring myself to pick him over players who are more central to creating more of the offense for everybody else and even themselves. I just he's
the best offensive player on a team whose offense like isn't very good. So like what do we do with that, you know?
Do you know who I also have written down? I didn't say his name though. And he was never gonna make it, but when you start getting into the bare bones, the front, like Vooch has been pretty good this year.
look, I'm not like I said LaVine, so I can't knock you for saying Vooch. Like that guy is making 40+% on like decent volume from 3. I didn't have him, but I definitely, as an also considered, I can't fault you there. So my wild card, I wonder if we have the same wild cards, because I thought
I guarantee you we don't, because I can already tell you're a hater. And it's funny, if you're watching on YouTube, Grant and I decided not to reveal the picks to each other, but I have to go through it in post, and I'll put the graphics up on the screen. So you're knowing it, but me and Grant are reacting in real time.
We don't know each other's picks. Yeah. Okay, so I assume we both have Trae Young.
We do. The passing has been, the shot efficiency is clearly down, and Jalen Johnson has been great for the Hawks, but Trae Young is still just the engine for everything they do. And his playmaking this year, I don't even care he's averaging 12 plus. He's just off the charts when you're looking at just his creation ability.
And I think like I have all the same stuff. He's a plus 10.2 offensive rating swing, which is elite among guys that play 1,000 minutes or more this year. The fewest field goal attempts per game since he was a rookie. So like a little bit of credit for kind of being like a less is more, even though the efficiency still is not there, just like being more of a passer. And that's where the 12 assists come from. And the Hawks score at 114 points per 100 when he's on. And that's a top 10 rate. And he's the reason it's good. And that just, I thought I was going to have to like stretch for a Trae Young case, but of my 2 wild cards, I feel worlds better about him than the other guy. So your second one must be LaMelo.
Yeah. Did you have him?
He's an also considered for me. My other one is Halliburton, which I feel like I had the bigger question between him and Siakam, and I landed on him. Couple stats. EPM still loves him, even though I've like said several times that he's just not good anymore. He's in the 97th percentile in offensive estimated plus minus. I'm going to knock off his October games. And so since November 1st, 19, 9-4, 45 from the field, 38 from 3, 87 from the line. He was over 60% true shooting last month. He's at nearly 70% this month. It's like gradually we're getting back to like good Halliburton. And with the advanced metrics still loving him as much as they do, despite him having like a real rough start, considering his role on the team, like it really like the comparison between him and Melo is fascinating. Or LaMelo is fascinating because like LaMelo's numbers are all just better, but I just am never going to be persuaded. Maybe you can do it that like he actually is a more deserving all-star than someone like Halliburton.
I mean, when you frame it that way, I don't want to sound, and look,
no, there's a case I thought about him. Like you're the LaMelo believer, or well, I mean, relatively speaking.
Look at what and who is around him. Who is the second best player on the Hornets? Brandon Miller. Who is the third best player on the Hornets? You don't even know his name, because I'm not even sure there's a third best player on the Hornets right now. So
Eddie Jones.
He's in the 98th percentile. People say, oh, he's chasing shots. The shots he takes are stupid. And okay, sure, they're going in at a reasonable enough clip to where you say, just keep shooting them. He's in the 98th percentile of self-created shot making. So I'm not talking about volume. I'm talking about the actual shot making. The Hornets have a higher offensive rating with him on the court than the Sixers have with Tyrese Maxey on the court, who is another name I considered. And okay, it's like the Pacers have a higher offensive rating when Halliburton's on the court, but look at who Halliburton gets to play with. Siakam and Miles Turner, even Benedict Matt. Like, like Damian Lillard. LaMelo has basically the same offensive. The Hornets have the same offensive rating on the court with LaMelo as the Bucks have with Damian Lillard. And look at the guys that they have around them. He is literally, I shouldn't say literally because that's apparently a sign of low IQ. So I'm going to say literally, but he is dragging this team to offensive.
He's figuratively doing it.
He's the reason that like it might not always look pretty, but like, and also the stuff he does where it's the game that they won against the Suns, who are just a fucking shit show at the moment, by the way. He scored off his own miss 3 or 4 times. Like this, like he just keeps going at you. And and there are a lot of players like this, but like he just doesn't remember the last shot. He will take 3 shots on the same quote unquote possession if the Hornets are going to get an offensive rebound, even if they don't go in. And so I know he's not good on defense. He should be better when you look at the physical tools and what we actually know he's capable of. But this is someone who is just averaging over 29 points per game. He drives the entire offense as a playmaker as well. And the fact that like he takes these shots are ridiculous. And it'd be cool if he was shooting 37% from 3 instead of 34% from 3. But if you're going to average 30 points per game and have perhaps one of the 3 or 4 most difficult shot diets in the league, and you're still going to average 7 assists per game, which would actually be higher when you look at the number of times teammates either don't catch your passes or miss off your passes, I think he's become underrated. You don't like if you want to say he doesn't drive winning, why does Tyrese Maxey drive winning as an independent star? What is the evidence we have that Tyrese Maxey is going to do that if he doesn't have another tier A, like one player alongside him? And I'm denigrating Tyrese Maxey, but I'm just saying like you don't just get, it's kind of like the conversation about, well, why did we anoint the Thunder instead of the Cavs? We have doubts about the Cavs, but the Thunder are going to win the title, even though they're both on pace to win 70 games. I see a lot of that with LaMelo. And look, he's bad on defense, but like the self-creation, the passing ability, I'm going to take him over a lot of other guards in the Eastern Conference.
I got to say, like, I think all of the arguments that I would lean on against LaMelo just like it's hard to support him with numbers and just because it's like, no, I'm just being honest. Like I guess I'm more bothered by like the unserious is the word that constantly gets applied to him. And that does bug me a little bit. Like, I think some of that is unfair because like his game is just like not casual, but it's like, it's just loose. Like he is very comfortable. And that's a feature and not a bug sometimes, I think. And like, yeah, what's he supposed to do with the talent that's around him? Great question. Like, I don't know if you put Halliburton or Trae Young on that team. Trae Young's probably a little different, but like what that offense would look like, I don't have great, like statistically supported arguments against LaMelo because you do at least, I mean, defensively it's like atrocious, but if you just like, how much do we care about that? If I'm talking about Halliburton and Trae Young ahead of him. So like, it's obviously not that important. I do think it's just like the feel I get. And I don't know, like that this is maybe not the best basis to make an all-star pick. Fortunately, these don't count. Nobody cares. He's just like, I guess I just don't believe that what he's doing is just what you're saying is like driving winning, which is kind of unfair. I'll concede that.
Who's driving winning on this Hornets team?
Nobody. That's the problem.
No, like who are you taking in the league that will drive winning for the current version of the Charlotte Hornets with all the injuries they've had to suffer?
Yeah, like who would be doing a better job than LaMelo?
I actually think the fairest, aside from defense, would like he can be stiff and inattentive on defense. I don't have an argument against that.
And like for him, now this is not a good quality, but it's like he's got to be thinking like, what's the point? Like there's no defense anywhere here. Like why am I gonna? Well, that's a bad tone setter, but he's not wrong.
I actually think the most poignant form of criticism for him, and it's more subjective, would be if you truly don't believe that he is wired or able to play, let's use offense as an example, or just play differently overall on a better team. And it's give him a better, which you haven't, because even the Hornets have real NBA players. They have not all been available at once in how many years? And by the way, LaMelo's a part of that. I just think he's 30 points and 7+ assists per game. Like I can't ignore that when you're just looking at like these shots are 34% from 3. It doesn't sell when we're talking about it, but when they're all basically self-created and there's just no one else to do any of this, like Brandon Miller comes closest, or do you want to see like Micic try and like bank in threes from the corner or something? Like, by the way, the other thing I didn't note with him, he is the percentile for true usage, like which factors in playmaking and all that. He's in the 100th percentile of true usage because the Hornets do not have anyone else.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he's doing this and isn't less efficient, I view that as an absolute win. And I thought Tyrese Halliburton was just too inconsistent for
Mhm.
me because I think if you were saying who are you taking for the next X amount of years, it's a discussion, but most people would take Tyrese Halliburton. This season specifically, it came down to like kind of the Maxey and the Lillard for me. The Hornets have a better net rating with LaMelo on the court than the Sixers do with Maxey.
Yeah.
And the Bucks still have not won their overall minutes with Damian Lillard on the court. So he's close to what the Hornets were with LaMelo. Tyrese Halliburton's an interesting pick. I don't hate it, but I'm not gonna lie, he didn't come down to like one of the final 2 or 3
Yeah.
for me.
I don't love it. I will say, were you surprised about how easily you could dismiss Maxey and Lillard? Because I looked, just started looking once I got down to the last couple wild cards. I was like, oh no, that can't. It's not going to be those guys.
I think Tyrese Maxey probably wouldn't even be a blip if it wasn't for just like he's been on a tear for a little while now, but he kind of opened. He had the injury, of course, and he also
Right.
opened the season, wasn't like shooting too well from the floor. And I still just have questions about. Again, the Sixers have not been nearly healthy enough, but just like, is this someone we know? LaMelo, we know Tyrese Halliburton can drive offense independent of having
Right.
another elite option on the court. The returns for Tyrese Maxey are still sort of iffy there.
Maxey's really interesting. He's almost got like the Levine criticism of like he'll make the one pass, but like he's not like a born facilitator, like basically the other 3 guys that we're talking about. And what like I don't know what that like scales to, like he's super fast and he gets downhill and he shoots a lot of threes and he makes them. Like, is he like I don't he's not like a capital P point guard, I don't feel like. And that just kind of puts a ceiling on like how much offensive value you can really have if you're not the guy that's like constantly making the difficult passes to set other players up. So, and like he just was way overstretched to start the year and that destroyed his efficiency numbers.
Did you have any deeper cut name just listed before we get to the front court that you, or no, we already did it, but like that you just considered? I had the name was written down. I never thought I was going to pick him. I had Karis LeVert in there.
Well, I actually had a quick second where I was like, should I consider Peyton Pritchard? Because like, if you just, he's played like enough minutes to where it's like more than guys like Steph or like comparable to some other guys. And just all the advanced metrics love him. Cause if you make a trillion threes, you said Jalen Johnson, I gave him a quick look. I'm just trying to think like who else. Not yeah. So my official like toughest snubs: Levine, Brown, Siakam, Hero, Dame, LaMelo, Bam. Weird year for Bam. That like not even really a thought for him.
I still think he's a quintessential eye test player, especially on the defensive end. But like the offense has been weird this year. Would probably be the most charitable way to put it from him. So that was probably a tough cut. Derek White ends up being. I thought I had him in there, but Mobley's absolutely an all-star for me.
Oh,
So
it's got to be Mobley over White.
Although you put Derek White in over LaMelo, I guess I could do something like that, but I still I value the self-creation that LaMelo has there.
That's fair.
We'll recap at the end when we get to it, but we are on to our Western Conference starters, and because it's West Coast bias time, Grant, we got.
All right, so let's go with the guards to start. SGA, like non-negotiable.
Hold on.
How much time do you want to spend on SGA? Plus 15.1 net rating swing when he's on the floor, league leader in drives, just like the most singularly unguardable.
More threes lately too.
Yeah, he's it. My second guard, I was surprised I landed here. Maybe listeners and you won't be, but I did end up with Steph Curry as the other starting guard in the West, and I came into this thinking it wouldn't be him.
Can I just say, I think you are the only person who were surprised that you picked Steph Curry. Anyone who knows our brand would actually, I think, be more surprised if you didn't pick Steph Curry.
I think these last handful of games and just the developing narrative of the season for this team is like the real problem here. And this is what I was sort of buying into, is that Steph and Draymond just aren't what they were. And like you look at the counting stats and part of that's the minutes, but like they're just down and just everything looks harder for Curry as you're watching games. Like separation's harder to get. His finishing's not as good. Just the turnovers seem to be more egregious. Like he has games where he's just like, he had a scoreless game. Like he just, the bad games have been bad. And then there he is with like a 117.9 offensive rating for the Warriors, which are just a dog shit offense if he's not on the floor, and they look, among the best in the league when he's out there. 62 true shooting, 31% assist rate, which are both up from last season. So I was like stunned that there were stats that are up for him. So you talk about the gravity, all that stuff. I didn't think he was going to be a starter for me. And then it just became like, oh no, he just has to be.
I think if Luka didn't miss so much time, that might have been the way to go. But yeah, I don't. So who do you have in the front court?
Jokic, do we want to talk about him at all? Like, there's just nothing to say there.
He's ducking the Celtics.
Yeah, didn't want to see him. Didn't want to give him 40, 17, and 11 like he probably would have in a loss. So Jokic won. Jokic is the first one, obvious one. I also have Wemby. Wemby is going to start. Best defensive player in the league, shooting 1 million threes, holding opponents to 50% inside 6 feet. That's elite. Opponents don't shoot very much when he's on around the basket. Attempt frequency at the rim's down like 4%. That's excellent among bigs with 1,000 minutes. The last one's Anthony Davis. Another one that I was like, am I really gonna? And then just, I don't feel, maybe you can point to somebody that like definitely deserves it over Davis. That was more where I landed, was like, yeah, he's not an MVP candidate anymore, not a defensive player of the year candidate, but the numbers just like are what they are. He's an awesome player on both ends that's hugely productive.
I think if Kevin Durant had played more, you could have gotten to him. Jaren Jackson Jr. might be worth a look, but I actually ended up with the same exact starters as you. I mean, so just to tack on to Steph, by the way, you mentioned the offensive rating swing. The Warriors have what would be a top 7 net rating when Steph is on the court. Like, really think about how bad the Warriors are lately.
500 team and way worse than that over the last like 6 weeks.
He also ranks in the 99th percentile of 3-point shot making, despite being in the 4th percentile, Grant, of 3-point shot quality.
Yeah.
And he's in the 96th percentile of self-created shot making and the 100th percentile of passing quality. That comes back to the word that you used of just gravity, where it's okay, Steph isn't necessarily one of the best passers in the league, but defenses are around him. Like, what did you say before? A minimum of 2.5 defenders are on him at all times.
There's 2.5 guys on him every possession. And if he gets the ball off, like, he does throw a lot of real bad, like lazy passes, careless passes. But if he gets it off, whoever ends up with it is open. Like, that's just what happens.
And dunks and threes is EPM. Like, they still have him as a top 10 player in the league based off. That's not the end all be all, but I think some people say, oh, look at the Warriors and Steph played. No, Steph can be an all-star starter and it's actually fine. The Shea for me was just easy. I actually think, my latest MVP leaderboard, I still have Jokic, but I really do think that Shea is, and I guess I have to do a mea culpa on that. I really thought Jokic was going to run away with this. And the Nuggets have actually gotten better optically when you look at their spot in the West and proximity to maybe being the third seed or the second seed or whatever. But like, Shea is just, the Thunder can't score without him. And they win with generational defense, but he's an active participant in that generational defense. So I think he's made that a case. He was easy for me. Davis was interesting. His scoring's kind of dropped down a bit, but I still think he's really good on defense, even though the Lakers aren't all the time. They did clean up some issues, and then a lot of them came back against the shorthanded Mavericks the other night. But they're using him as an offensive hub still. So like, the scoring is down, but like, when you look at him versus a Mobley, for an example, like, Mobley isn't necessarily a shot creator in that way. And Davis has kind of become that this year. And then Wemby is just what you meant. Best defensive player in the league. And over the last month, he's just averaging over 28 points per game, shooting almost 40% from 3 on absurd volume. Shooting, by the way, still 54% or whatever inside the arc during that time. This is the best defensive player in the NBA, always has a case to be an all-star. And so even though you're looking at this as a full season thing, Wemby's didn't start off the year great, but like, he's been on a tear for now half of the first half of the season. And so you're the best defensive player in the league who's now just unguardable on the offensive end when you're looking at your ability to get up and make threes. What's the argument against him being a starter?
I don't have one. I want to ask you, just while we're on him, because we haven't really talked about this, I don't think. Like, do you have thoughts on, I don't know if it's like a like rampant criticism, but you do see it a fair amount of like, why is he shooting so many threes? And not just in this, why is anyone shooting so many threes? Like, not part of that discussion this year, but just like, how do you feel when he's like shooting from deep with like the volume that he's shooting with, which is like, it is like, it's unusual, but do you have an issue with it? Or is there something you wish that he was doing instead of that? Or like, is that the way forward offensively for him? Just what are your thoughts generally on his 3-point shooting?
I really wish that he was just getting more catch and shoot looks inside the restricted area.
Yeah.
Like, let's bring back poor spacing. No, I'm being facetious
here.
No,
that's a real thing though. Like, I wonder, like, why don't you just dump it in, or like have him duck in or cut through? Like, I don't know.
So I think it's both situational and by design. So by design is, if you want to, I don't want to see Wemby being dumped the ball down low. If you want to get him moving downhill and that's how you want him to finish at the rim more often, I get it. But that will take a wear and tear on his body. And he's just not built. He's 8 feet tall, Grant, and he weighs like $130. I like whatever he weighs. The other thing too is I don't know that the Spurs are built for him to do that. Part of him, like he can get off threes, but like he is mission critical to their spacing at the moment. If he had different personnel where the primary front court partner beside, like Jeremy Sohan's been good this year, but he's not the ideal front court partner for Wemby. And even when you're looking, okay, Chris Paul's brought some structure to the offense, but between him, Trey Jones, and Stephon Castle, it's not like you have a just ton of these great tacticians in their prime that are going to put Wemby in the right spots with the ball. And even if you view Chris Paul as that, which he still is, none of the names I just listed are really opening up the floor, including Chris Paul, who has upped his 3-point volume this year. So I almost view it as, what would the Spurs offense look like if Wemby wasn't taking and making these things?
Yeah.
I think it would be a disaster.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think I agree. Like I was kind of playing devil's advocate with like, well, why not get it closer to the basket as you were? I think there's a good argument to be made that the maximal value offensively he can provide, like going forward, and certainly this year, is as like a player whose main offensive thing is a ton of 3-point shooting. Just because, like, one, no wear and tear. That's going to be a thing you have to worry about. There's like different wear and tear, right? Like, you get tired running around the screen or whatever. But like, isn't a guy that's the best defensive player in the world who can also force you to put a big guy on him? Because if you put a guard on him, like he's not even going to see him when he's shooting from deep, right? So like those are all open shots. If the guy that's on him is 6'5", basically, so you have to put a big on him, and then that big is not in the lane, and so like you have just created the most like scalable slash like the value he could provide if he's like a 38% 3-point shooter that gets up 10, 12 per 100, like that's like unsolvable. I feel like, for other teams.
Isn't the other part of it too? So like, let's use Kevin Durant as an example, who is, I guess if he wanted to play the way Wemby was, he could, but he's what, 5-6 inches shorter or I guess what he's listed, he's probably a foot shorter according to whatever he's listed at. But like his handle is never going to be as tight or as just mechanically sound as someone who's shorter because the ball has to travel a greater distance. He still can work on the interior because he's relative to Wemby or relative to NBA players, he's closer to a normal size human being. Wemby, his handle's not going to be as exposed that far out from the perimeter. And it also puts you in a situation where maybe you don't want him handling the ball as much because that's never going to be, turnovers might always be an issue. I don't know that because Kevin Durant has never had the best handle in the NBA. He's had a great handle for just the size that he is and the distance the ball has to travel. But this also puts Wemby in a situation to where you theoretically don't have to dribble as much, or it's more of a casual dribble because in theory, at least not right now, you're not facing as much pressure as if you were going to get downhill or even if you were working from the post.
Yeah. And I think too, like he doesn't just shoot like toes on the line. He's like a good, not a full step for him, because that would be like beyond half court, but like a normal person's full step behind the line. And just like, forget who they were playing. Maybe it was in the Denver game. Like it's the thing I always think when Donovan Mitchell shoots is like, God, that comes out easy. Like what an easy ball he shoots. It's just it's effortless, like good base. Like really you expect it to go in even like slightly off balance. It feels like he's got like a good, like again, good base like that. I think there's a great chance Wemby's like a 40% guy, like at some point. And is just making, 4, 5, 6 a game, something stupid like that.
Do you think there's also something too, and we've seen him defend in a bunch of different ways, but him also just taking so many threes, like against certain teams, that's going to take their most valuable defensive player out of their comfort zone. Like not every team's going to be able to game it to put specific players on like where they can leave someone around the rim. And so then that opens up stuff for everybody else. I guess some people don't like watching it, but this is just, I find value in what are just basically anomalies. And that like Wemby is an anomaly in so many ways. And so again, we might be in our silo. And look, I think if the Spurs look different, if they made a trade for a De'Aaron Fox, or if there was just like someone, the front court was built differently around him, if you want him to get more kind of catch and roll or catch and go looks, I totally understand that. I just don't even know if the Spurs are built for him to do that optimally right now. Who are your
Uh,
reserves in the West?
all right, so I did give Luca one of the guard spots. He's 28, 8 and 8, stupid high usage, just like all the usual Luca stuff. It's just a volume question. I get it if like he hasn't played quite enough. I think it was close enough for me. The other guard that I went with, this is where it was getting really difficult for me. I did go with Edwards. I think like we've talked a little bit about how it's so impressive that he is clearly not like in his optimized role and is still just like excelling as a super, 13 and a half threes up per 100 possessions, making almost 43% of them. It's not quite where he was last year defensively, at least during the playoffs, but it's still just someone that like you're not going at him ever. I think that offense is basically designed like antithetically to his success, and he's still been a really good offensive player. So I don't know. I'd be curious what your thoughts are on Edwards, but
I'm
there
actually
was a minute
surprised
there
you're
where I was
having
like, is he
him
going to
on.
make it at all?
I'm surprised you think I didn't have any qualms about
No.
it. He's in my backcourt
Okay.
as a reserve. Sorry.
And do you have Luca as well?
I do. I bandied about because so I still have an unsettled spot as we're recording this
Me
right
too.
now because I put Luca as a wild card at first just because of the injury, but he's just been good enough to where reserve. What's the difference? Like it's just you could whoever I like it would open up, allow me to put a front court player in the wild card spot. So I have both him and Edwards in the backcourt as well. And just I mean the Mavs have been the thing about Luca too this season. The Mavs are killing it when he's on the court. They're plus 11.4 per 100 possessions. But while his scoring, like his counting stats are kind of down, he's spending more time away from the ball. And I like, is there, or should this not be part of the All-Star conversation? We've now seen him play on faster versions of the Mavericks this season and last. And now it's, he's off the ball a lot more. Isn't there kind of value in this player's more malleable than we thought? Because part of the biggest forms of criticism for a James Harden or a Trae Young and even Luca has been their functional rigidity.
Yeah.
And Luka's just more flexible than he was a couple years ago. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it felt like a want to as opposed to like a can't, like of course he could be good off the ball. And like I sort of held it against him that he wanted to be so heliocentric. So just coming at it from a different angle, it's like a huge positive that has been willing to and has predictably like been good at sort of like scaling down his like extreme on ball usage. I think that is a positive.
Who's in your so we have the same backcourt. Was there anyone else that you were I guess that could be in the wild card. So who was in your front court?
There's a lot of guards that I really agonized over, and we may have to talk about it. So I did have Jalen Williams as a reserve forward. We talked about off air, just like what do you call this guy positionally? I feel like a front court player. His true shooting is under 56%. Like the efficiency has not been there, but he's still 25-5. The best defensive season of anybody, maybe other than like Wemby and Davis in the West that we've talked about so far. Spent a lot of the season guarding centers. Is a huge part of a historically good defense. Just enough production, and he's still like, even though if you really dig in, like the Thunder are way worse when he's on. Like the net rating plummets when he's on, and a lot of that's because he's overtasked as like the main creator with no SGA and lineups that don't shoot it well. None of that was going to keep him off my team. Like, first of all, we're getting to Thunder, and Chet's not going to make it, so it's got to be him. But he's been good enough on both ends, I think, even if the efficiency is not where it's been.
And I don't know how much because he's been so good on defense, it probably offset. Like, let's use like someone who can't be a good self-creator, but if they're going to bridge the gap with the defense and just being an awesome compliment, I think that's fine to put him on there. So he also made my reserve list.
Okay. The other two reserve front courts for me, I just felt clean, felt like a nice way to go are just LeBron and Durant. I almost like didn't look up the numbers just because I know that LeBrons are what they are. Like they're, even if he's got like one of the biggest negative net rating swings in the league, I mean, he's not defending but he's what I want to get it right. 24, 8 and 9, 38% from three, making half his shots from the field. You can definitely watch him and say like, he's actually not as good as the numbers suggest. I'm not going to keep him off of there. He's played 30 plus games. He's healthy enough. Durant is the guy, if you're concerned about volume, you could bump, but I was not going to keep Kevin Durant off of my all-star team either, because if he had played 30 games, like you said, Anthony Davis might not be starting. It might be him.
I have Kevin Durant as well, and I thought about putting him as a starter over Anthony Davis. So he was going to make he's just been at both ends of the floor for the most part spectacular. And the Suns have lost the minutes that he's played. It's not a LeBron situation, but it's just when you watch the Suns, the problem 90% of the time is not Kevin Durant,
Right. Yeah.
even close to it. I have Jaren Jackson Jr.
Okay.
instead of LeBron. I think the extra self-creation that he has shoulders, coupled with what he's been able to do defensively for them, he's just far more dynamic overall over these past. He was more dynamic last year. Now he's even more dynamic than that. And he's on. I also took the stance, not that I took the stance, but you have to look what the Memphis Grizzlies have done this year. How would you not even have someone in the wild card spot for them? And Ja might have a case if he had played a little bit more, but I think Jaren Jackson Jr. has been clearly their most valuable player this year.
I totally agree. Jackson did make one of my wild card spots to bump ahead. And like the wild cards and the reserves, to me, I'm not like one's better or worse than the other. Like I wanted LeBron and Durant next to each other on my Google Doc. So that's what happened. But yeah, Jaren Jackson, it was like, as I got into it and I was running out of spots, it was like, well, there's no way I can leave him off. Like so Wemby and I forget who else it is are right at about 50% opponent field goal percentage inside 6 feet. And those guys, Wemby's up at like 8 or 10 or something field goals defended. Jackson's only at about 5, but he's at 49.7%. So even though he's not like always in the rim protecting role, Jackson is still just like one of the absolute best at it. And he's super versatile. And the like 11 plus drives per game. Giannis is the only big who's more efficient on drives that takes to the basket that often. Like Jackson's just like, I don't know. We talk about like most overlooked or most underrated. He's a no-brainer all-star for me.
Yeah. He's averaging 23 points, 3.1 stocks per game. And yeah, the threes, he's still below 35%. But you mentioned the drives. He's getting a foul line basically more than ever, hitting 56.1% of his twos. In addition to just everything he does on defense, was the easier inclusion for me. So you already did. He made one of your wild cards. Who are all the names before you get to your last, like that you consider for a wild card spot?
All right. So, this is my spot where we like have to have a conversation because I don't know.
That's great because I have my final wild card spot open too.
I don't know what to do with this. So I'll give you the names. There's 2 names that I have like this guy or this guy in the wild card spot. Players I also thought about in no particular order: James Harden, Alperen Şengün, Kyrie Irving. That one was, it might just need to be Kyrie. We'll see. Ivica Zubac, I think, needs to be mentioned. Devin Booker was like a quick look, but then the name recognition did not hold up to the scoring efficiency this year. So the last 2 and the ones I'm stuck on, if Kyrie can't jump in there, are De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis. And I texted Kings fan friend of mine and just asked like, who's been better this year? And this is a friend that is well aware of me having called Domantas Sabonis the most overrated player in the league like 2 years ago now. So understands my opinion there. And he said like he thinks it's Fox. But Sabonis has been really good since Malik Monk got into the starting lineup because he's the only guy that can like hit a roll man on the team. So we need to talk. If those are 2 of your guys you're considering, and maybe it's Kyrie, we got to just like hash it out. Cause my very first instincts was Fox, but Sabonis's numbers are to the point where it's just like, how do you exclude him? I don't know how, even if, all the eye tests and my personal biases are just like, he doesn't actually help the way the numbers say he does. I don't know what to do with it.
So in addition, I had all the names that you did. I have LeBron as a consideration because I didn't put him as a reserve. And I also have Norman Powell was on there.
For me. Yeah, that's oversight by me. I should have thought about him too.
The interesting thing about so I'll tell you one of my reserves, which are already up on the screen. I have Alperen Şengün in there. I think he's been, he's just someone on the Rockets needs to make it. And I think you would hope he'd be a little bit more efficient on offense, but like their half court offense isn't great, but he is one of the only guys that you need to go get a bucket. Like it can go through him. You can run the offense through him for others. He's also been really, really good on defense this year. And so I threw him in the wild card spot. The Fox versus Sabonis thing was interesting. And I had the same dilemma when considering if I was putting one of them, would it be one or the other? My gut says it's Fox, but Sabonis is having like a really good efficient season. And then the Kings, when Fox plays without Sabonis, Grant, a minus 3.4 points per 100 possessions with an offensive rating in the 50th percentile. Flip that. And Sabonis without Fox the Kings are like a plus 12 per
Mhm.
100 possessions. I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with that. My eye says that it should be there plus 12.1 with an offensive rating in the 93rd percentile. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that.
So I think like I think the makeup of the team is such that that stat isn't like it's crazy that they don't win the minutes with Fox on and Sabonis off, but well maybe it's not because like there's no backup bigs on this team at all. So you take Sabonis off, it's just like we can't do anything in the paint. You take Fox off, you still have Monk, DeRozan, like there's still like creators, I guess, and maybe it's just the makeup of the team I think is almost built to make it so yeah, you can survive without one of those backcourt or wing guys. But if you
Right,
take
right.
the bonus out, the replacement behind him is just like Alex Len and Trey Lyle. Like that's, those guys like wouldn't play at all for like most teams, I think, based on how they've done this year. So I think, so what I wanted to make sure I get this right. If you just look at, I keep citing it because I think it's my favorite catch all, but on dunks and threes, estimated wins is the cumulative version of EPM. And Domantas Sabonis ranks 4th in the whole league in estimated wins added, right behind Jason Tatum, right ahead of Victor Wembanyama. Like the guys ahead of him are SGA, Jokic, and Tatum, and Sabonis is 4th. And so it's like, at what point do I have to just say like I'm not smart? And now that does, I think, factor in like replacement level stuff behind you. Like how much better do you make things than the guys that are on the floor when you aren't? And the dynamics we just talked about with the Kings rotation is such that like, yeah, the gap is enormous between what Sabonis does and what the guys who back him up are doing. That alone though still is like such a persuasive number, like way ahead of what Fox does. And yet I still am just like, no, Fox is a better player. He matters more. And I can't get past it.
The other thing with Sabonis too is that I think having him as your center, it forces you to defend a certain way that where even when you look at the Kings' vitals in a lot of areas, it seems like they're outperforming their talent, but he makes life so much harder on everybody else. And specifically Keegan Murray would be the one where his life just gets, because the Kings roster makes life impossibly hard on Keegan Murray, but I don't know how to factor that in at all. And then the other name that's like kind of standing out here, because you already put LeBron on your reserves. I don't know if I'm just getting nostalgic because he's age 40 and I know the age is coming, like the end is coming. The numbers are good. The Lakers still aren't great when he's on the court, but like you watch him, he clearly just doesn't give a fuck on defense a lot of the time.
He like can't. He's like not able to give a fuck.
I don't know what to do with that. And it's funny that it seems that, well, I'm hung up on 3 players for the final spot: LeBron, Domas, or De'Aaron Fox. Norman Powell has been really good. And he's doing some more self-creating, but he's just not as dynamic as a lot of these other. Like I would put LeBron in before Norman Powell. I'd put him in even before Zubats. But they definitely deserve honorable mentions. I don't know what to do here.
What about Kyrie? Isn't like I think
him too is listed on my long list, and I'm going to the numbers. The thing, I haven't excluded him. He's still on my list. The Mavs are winning the minutes he plays without Luka, but like kind of just barely, and the offense isn't as good as you would expect it to be. But his numbers are incredible too.
Yeah, he's so efficient. I almost like, I feel like I gotta have it's gotta be Fox or Sabonis for me. And I'm gonna go Fox to stay on brand as basically. But Kyrie is like, it's just as hard to snub Kyrie. It almost like it's a bad thing, but it's like, well, he's gonna miss some time with this back injury. Like maybe by the time we get to the All-Star game, it'll be like a little more justifiable. But I think Kyrie is just like objectively a better player probably than both Fox and Sabonis. So I'm going to go Fox just to keep it just so we can get out of this. But like Kyrie and Sabonis are really, really tough snubs. The rest of the guys, maybe Şengün, but the rest of the guys like Harden didn't really think that hard about, under 40% from the field. Zubats, great defense, but like Zubats is not like a star per se. So I just, I'll go Fox. Sorry to Sabonis and Kyrie in some order.
Who do you think between? I'm now latching on to Kyrie, but it's just like, is his role like how do you factor in like, okay, but then we didn't take J-Dub. Oh, he's playing better defense than Kyrie, but like Kyrie's role is made easier by the fact that Luka Doncic exists.
To me, like that's true. Like Kyrie's a better second option than like basically anybody. But and like if Kyrie Irving is your best offensive player, I think there's a really good chance your offense, all things being equal, is good, right? Like I think he's not what he was, but he's still just an insanely efficient jump shooter, great ball handler. Maybe that passing isn't like what you'd want from a true like offensive alpha, but I don't know. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to just like discount how good he is as like I don't know. Yeah, you're next to Luka, so it skews everything. But like he's a number one offensive option. I think like at least in so far in as much as like Fox is to be to compare.
I think I'm gonna go with Kyrie. Leaving LeBron off feels wrong, though.
Little
You didn't
wrong.
do that, but
I had to have LeBron, but I'll admit it was more maybe sentimental. The numbers are good enough, like counting
is
wise,
that
that
what
I
the
could just
wild
be
card spot should
sentimental.
be for? That I should just be allowed to say, okay, I'm sentimental for LeBron, so we're gonna put him in here. He's individually, he's been really, really good on offense,
Mhm.
but he's just such a net negative on the defensive end
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
I just don't know what to do. I think I'm gonna go with Kyrie.
I think I love that because then it's sorry to Sabonis, who doesn't make either of our teams, but that way I get Fox, we get Kyrie on it, and
Well, I think it would
we
be
spread it
best.
out.
I'm going to determine it by viewing it in a vacuum. You're going to answer the question for me. Kyrie, Sabonis, Fox, or LeBron has to be your best player on a whatever team. Which best player gives you the chance of having the best team right now?
Man, he has to be your best player. So Sabonis is out because that's like my main knock on him. He can't be. My knee-jerk reaction is LeBron, but there's not really a statistical case to support that. So
LeBron
I would say
has the
LeBron.
minutes over Kyrie, right?
Oh yeah, LeBron's been healthy relatively. I mean, he had that mini like that get right hiatus, but he will probably by the time people hear this because Kyrie's missing time now.
God, this is so tough. I honestly, I don't know what to do here, Grant. I'm struggling. Told you that this was going to be tough. So Kyrie's at like 1,070 minutes, and LeBron's at 1,150. It's just that's not a big enough difference for me. I'm going to go with Kyrie.
Do it.
And it's tough. You know what's also skewing me is that the Lakers have been better that game against the Mavericks where Kyrie and Luka didn't play, notwithstanding. And then like the Mavericks have been sort of like even dating back because they weren't playing well this past time when Luka went down with the calf injury. And like Kyrie's part, I don't feel great about this. You could go with either four. I'm going to go with Kyrie as my final spot.
All right. So you want to recap here? You want to start with the East?
I'll go first since it's the East. My starters are Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Karl-Anthony Towns. My reserves are in the backcourt, Cade Cunningham and Darius Garland. My front court reserves are Jaylen Brown, Evan Mobley, Pascal Siakam. My two wild cards are LaMelo Ball and Trae Young.
All right. My East starters, beginning with the guards, are Jalen Brunson and Darius Garland. My front court, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Karl-Anthony Towns. Reserve guards, Donovan Mitchell, Derek White. Reserve front court, Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Cade Cunningham. A little bit of a stretch there. My two wild cards are Trae Young and Tyrese Halliburton.
In the West, starting, I have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Steph Curry. In the front court, I have Anthony Davis, Victor Wembanyama, and Nikola Jokic. Not a single wing in the starting. Love to see it, actually. Reserves, backcourt, I have Anthony Edwards and Luka Doncic. Reserves for the front court, I have Jalen Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Kevin Durant. My wild cards in the West are Alperen Şengün and Kyrie Irving. By the way, Alperen Şengün, I haven't seen him mentioned a ton among All-Stars. I think he's having a really good year. It's just the Rockets have so many dudes, and I don't know that the offense is built for him to be a lot more efficient than he has been.
I think that's all fair. So my starting West All-Stars at the guards or at the backcourt spots, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Steph Curry, Nikola Jokic, Victor Wembanyama, and Anthony Davis in the front court. My reserve backcourt players, Luka Doncic, Anthony Edwards. Reserve front court, Jalen Williams, LeBron James, Kevin Durant. Wildcard number 1, Jaren Jackson Jr. Wildcard number 2, after much debate, I still feel terrible about it, is De'Aaron Fox.
That was a brutal discussion. I feel terrible about it.
I knew that last West spot was going to be because there was like 5 guys and we just agonized over it. Everybody heard it. That last one is brutal. Fortunately, like there'll probably be an injury or two. So like Kyrie will get in or Kyrie will probably get voted in or whatever. And then we'll at least get like 3 or 4 of the 5 that we couldn't choose between.
And I'm wondering too, because of the new setup with the All-Star game. So there's Franz Wagner. Let's say he makes it, even though he wouldn't. If there's going to be, can you just name a West guy instead of going into the East that probably won't have deserving players?
That's it. I don't know. I don't know if that's how that's going to work. Yeah, hopefully they pull from the West because the snubs there were much more. I guess.
Yeah, I feel pretty bad about not having Tyrese Maxey or Damian Lillard on my like. I don't feel terrible about not having them, so I feel bad about Sabonis, Fox, and LeBron not making my. That's Sabonis, Fox, and LeBron didn't make an All-Star West, like the West. That just feels icky, and I hope LeBron makes it just because I'm a sucker for nostalgia. And he's the numbers. You said the numbers before. That's still kind of absurd.
They're enough, and he'll make it. Like there's no, if this might be, what does he have? Maybe one more year after this too, where it's like, then it'll be like, oh, he actually doesn't deserve it at all. And he still might make it. This is like the last one probably where you can at least make the case beyond sentimentality.
I think it's just, if you didn't watch him, if you only watched him, not even cursory, if you just didn't watch him on defense, I think he would just be the All-Star.
Oh yeah. The points, rebounds, assists, and like it looks good, scoring efficiency is good.
Offense looks good. People are like, he's a little slower than he used to. He's fucking 40 years old and he's still scoring 25 plus points a game. That's okay.
Yeah, right. And like, just make it like he still is a brilliant passer. He still has all like the brain is still there. It's just like on defense specifically, the body is like not willing. That's really the clearest thing so far this year.
Do you have anything else, or are you ready to take us out of here? This podcast is under 2 hours. It feels really weird, right?
Really solid job by us, especially since we spent the last 25 minutes trying to decide one spot.
I will say this is one of those podcasts I spent more time prepping for it, even if it doesn't sound like, than we did recording it, because it's just whenever it comes to rankings or picking all-star teams, I agonize over it. This shit doesn't matter. And yet here I am.
Yeah. We just want to get it right, and good news. We did indisputable.
We have different rosters, but they're somehow both 100%.
They're all right.
Actually, the move would be if I replaced Jaren Jackson Jr. with Sabonis, because then all the people that we agonized over would have made it in the West.
Yeah, that's probably it. I think we need a third person on here to just do a completely different West group. This was great. I think who knows how much of this is going to change. Like we still got, close to a month before the All-Star game. So we're
not doing it. This is our All-Star.
This is it. These are final. Yeah. Hopefully, yeah. We'll see. I mean, if Tyrese Halliburton has another terrible stretch, I will deeply regret that pick. Anyway, thanks everybody for listening. If you watch this on YouTube, thanks for that. Make sure you're subscribed there. Make sure you're commenting. Thumbs up all the videos, all that stuff. Rate, review, subscribe everywhere else. Leave us a 5-star review. That would be great wherever you're getting your podcast. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. And we're going to close as always with a shout out to Frank Ntilikina and an apology to Jared Allen.